It is amazing how certain phrases shape our society, how words literally can change our thinking. Grab your notes today. I want you to write out a couple of those phrases at the top left hand and top right hand of your notes. No blanks for this, but you could do it. On the top left, would you write, keep the peace? Keep the peace. That phrase has become part of our national thinking. We look at the United Nations peacekeepers. We look at peace as something that you keep, like it's something you hide away and you treasure and you hang on to tightly. Top right-hand corner, would you write the phrase, wage war? A much more active phrase, a much more aggressive phrase. The idea that if you're going to go to battle, go with all guns blazing. I think we need to create a new phrase, because I literally believe what Scripture teaches is that we are supposed to wage peace. We are supposed to wage peace. So would you draw an arrow from each of those phrases to the title of today's teaching? That's what we're going to talk about. How do we wage peace? How do we wage peace in a Christ-like way? I'm Dan Southerland, one of the pastors here at Westside. So glad you're here today. Whether you're up at Speedway, which is great. Hey, Speedway. Whether you're up at the Hill at Lansing, love those guys. They rock. Hey, guys. Whether you're joining us online today, which would be awesome. We're so glad you're coming in from around the world, whatever living room you're in, whatever laptop you're watching, or whether you're here at Lenexa. All of us are Westside. All of us today wanting to talk about how do we wage peace. We've been in a 5-week series called How to Fight Fair. And I hope you've been taking notes. I hope you've been learning as we've gone. The big idea for the series is this: conflict is normal in a relationship. It's normal. I've had a lot of folks come up to me and say, we must really be normal because we got a lot of conflict. It's normal. It's part of a parent-child relationship. It's part of an employee-employer relationship. It's part of a neighbor-to-neighbor relationship. It's certainly part of a husband and wife relationship. It's normal, but it's also God's opportunity for us to grow into maturity. It's God's opportunity for us to grow into maturity by fighting? No, by fighting fair. By learning to handle the conflict in a way that honors God. And today's big idea, would you write it in? Maturity means being able to navigate your way through a conflict without losing your peace. That's maturity. The world knows how to raise your voice in a conflict. The world knows how to be profane in a conflict. The world knows how to call names in a conflict. But Christ followers should be able to keep our peace even in the midst of the conflict. How do we wage peace? Acts 15 is a great passage. You remember the background if you've been here the last few weeks. The gospel, which has been traveling from Jewish person to Jewish person for the first several chapters of Acts, has now spilled out of the Jewish community into the non-Jewish community. And there are some rule keepers saying, wait a minute. They got to become Jewish before they follow our Jesus. They got to look like us, dress like us, act like us, get circumcised like us. That's a little personal. They got to do all of these things to be Jewish before they follow Jesus. Now, some of us are going, that's kind of a weird request, isn't it? Actually, 2,000 years later, we still do the same thing. There are denominations across this country who say, hey, if you don't look like us, act like us, dress like us, think like us, and believe like us, you can't be part of us. And you sure can't know about our Jesus. The reality is that in the middle of that conflict, they do the wise thing. They say, we need some outside help, like Troy talked about 3 weeks ago. We need to start with grace, like we talked about 4 weeks back. We need to debate together and reason together and come to a resolution together. And in this 5th week, they find that resolution. They basically do it 2 ways. Here's the 2 tracks we're going to run on today. If you're going to wage peace, you got to have the right mindset. You got to have the mindset of a peacemaker, and you got to have the right practices. In other words, there's some principles that we need to know, and there's some practices that we need to follow. First, keep the right mindset. Scripture says that peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. In other words, if you want things to be right in a relationship, it's all about peace. If you want things to be smooth at home, it's about waging peace. If you want things to go well with your kids, it's about waging peace. Look at what it says at the end of this passage. It says, after they've debated, after they've talked, after they've all expressed their opinions, it seemed good to us having come to one accord. Now, let me say quickly, this does not mean the 10 or 12 men in this discussion are all in one Honda somewhere. Some of y'all are going to get that halfway through lunch. But it was free. It does mean they have decided we can agree to this. Now look this way. Coming to one accord does not mean everybody gets what they want. Coming to agreement does not mean everybody's happy. Coming to agreement means given this and this and this, we believe this common ground is the best resolution. And you covenant together, you agree together, you come to one accord together. Several things that will help us to come to the right mindset. Would you write it in? First thing you need to remember, the one you're in conflict with is not your opponent. Oh, this is a mistake. We understand that war means we have an enemy. But sometimes we also think that conflict means we have an enemy. We do. We have a spiritual enemy. It's Satan himself. But when you and your wife are in conflict, she's not the enemy. When you and your kid are in conflict, I know it feels like it, but the kid is not the enemy. Kids, your parent is not the enemy. When you and your employer are in conflict, they're not the big bad wolf enemy. The reality is you want to have an ongoing relationship with them after. So you got to get past seeing them as the opposition. They're not the opposition. My wife and I have been married 39 years. If she becomes my enemy every time we have a conflict, then we haven't had any good years. Because we have conflict continually. Why? Because she's hard-headed. Because she's got an opinion and I've got an opinion. Here's the thing about Southerlands. There are no Indians in the Southerland clan. We're all chiefs. We're all chiefs. We've all got an idea. We all want to lead. We all want to determine where we're going and what we're doing. And the more chiefs you've got, the more peace you better pursue. That's the concept here. So quit seeing them as the opponent. The goal in our peace waging is resolution and reunion. Now, you remember a few weeks ago we talked about the goal. Sometimes we make the goal into winning the argument. If your goal is winning the argument, you may win the game, you're going to lose the battle. I remember years ago when Mary said to me, just because you can out-argue me and outthink me doesn't make you right. And you know it. To which I said, yes, ma'am. Because the reality is, if your only goal is to win the moment, you can lose in the long run. What's the goal? The goal is to resolve it. The goal is to get reunited. The goal is to get past the conflict and move forward. You're not waging war. You're not keeping the peace. You're waging peace. It's both of those concepts. And would you write this in as well? When left unresolved, conflict is going to do three things. We've talked about these several times over the years. It will distract you, it will discourage you, and it will divide you. Now, how does that happen? You're in conflict at home, and all of a sudden you're distracted from other things because of the conflict. And if it can't be resolved fairly quickly, you start going, I don't need this. I mean, I don't like how this feels. And you get down about it, and you get discouraged about it. And you stay down about it and discouraged long enough, you start saying things in your mind and to yourself like, I'm out of here if this doesn't change. I don't have to keep doing this. I didn't sign up for this. So you go from distraction to discouragement to division. By the way, this applies in all relationships in life. It is the enemy's tactic for getting us off track. My wife is an author. She writes a lot of books and a lot of devotions, and she's writing all the time. It's just what she does. And she's one of these authors who has to give birth to what she's writing. I mean, she's got to feel it. She's got to wrestle with it. She's got to go through the emotions of it. And recently, she's been working on rewriting her book on depression. Wow. It's brought back some of that struggle with depression. I keep saying to her, honey, can't you write a book on how to have great sex in a marriage? I mean, that's a book we could experience. But the reality is she has to go through and to feel it. And I've got to tell you, a lot of times when we teach a particular passage as the teaching team here at Westside, sometimes we're able to teach it without engaging in it, but man, it has been the strangest thing. Since we started this 5-week series on conflict just over a month ago, there's been major conflict to deal with. And I have found myself experiencing the very thing we're talking about. A couple of times I've said, wait a minute, Lord. I just want to teach the truth that conflict is your opportunity to grow. I don't want to experience it. I mean, seriously, God? And there's been moments where it has been distracting and it has been discouraging. And if you're not careful, it will lead to division. I mean, we've just had some conflict overseas with some of our partners. We've had conflict with dealing with people. It seems like there's just been more mess the last 5 weeks. I'm not surprised. It's God's opportunity for us to grow deeper. So Mary and I have learned at times of high conflict to say, God must be about to do something really awesome because he's getting us ready for some incredible, incredible growth. Don't leave it unresolved. The right mindset is, I'm going to wage peace, and go right ahead. Secondly, you got to have the right practices. Would you write that in? Not only the right principles, but practices. Principles are kind of for your head. Practices are for your life. Practices are things that you can do. And if you study Acts 15 closely, there are some really, really cool practices that they do in this passage. At the end of it, in verses 31 to 34, they literally write out their agreement. Now, I did not put this in your notes, but add it somewhere. It's a good thing to write out your resolutions to conflict, to write them down. My life coach and counselor for many years is a guy named Mike Grubbs, one of the wisest men I've ever known. And Mike has been married 40 years. And years ago, when they had conflict, they would write out what they'd call a covenant. They'd write out their resolution. And they have a drawer full of these resolutions. And I said, Mike, is that a good thing? He said, sometimes. He said, sometimes we get in a conflict and my wife goes, didn't we write something about that? And she goes back and sorts through it and says, here it is, Mike. I think you need to read this. It's a great reminder. They write out the agreement that they come to. They write it out because they read it. Look at what the passage says. And when they read it, they rejoiced because of its encouragement. And Judas and Silas, who were themselves prophets, encouraged and strengthened the brothers with many words. And after they'd spent some time, they were sent off in peace. Now, I want you to underline 3 words in those 4 verses. You ready? First, underline rejoiced. When they read it, they rejoiced. That's a key practice. You got to rejoice your way through conflict. Secondly, underline encouragement, another key practice. You got to stop and make sure that everybody is staying encouraged during conflict. And thirdly, underline the last word there, peace. Peace. All three of these are practices. First, let's look at rejoice. Rejoice is an agricultural word in the original Greek language, and it's going to gross you out, okay? I'm warning you ahead of time. Be ready to be grossed out. Rejoice is literally the word taken agriculturally from a cow chewing its cud. A cow chewing its cud. And what it means is re-chew your joy. Now, I don't know how much you want to know about cows or how much you do know about cows, but these are not just boots on my feet. There's a little bit of cowboy in my soul. Cows have 4 stomachs. You aware of that? You ever notice that a cow eats mostly grass? I want to give you a challenge sometime. Try eating a handful of grass. It's not easy. I mean, you got to chew it, you got to chew it, and you got to chew it. It sticks to the roof of your mouth. It sticks in between your teeth. It's flat. It doesn't have much substance to it. Has the same nutritional value as lettuce for you salad people out there. Just sprinkle a handful of grass on your salad. That'll work. But literally, it's hard to chew. How do I know? I've tried it. What the cow does is it chews it until it forms into a chunk, swallows it into its first stomach, and then brings it back up later to re-chew. There's the gross part. Some of y'all just went, you gotta be kidding me. I'm hearing this at church. Yeah, because it's a great word picture of what we have to do with our joy. Because conflict distracts us, discourages us, and divides us, one of the things these guys do in Acts 15 and we have to do is stop in the middle and say, wait a minute, let's remember how good God's been to us. Let's remember all the good stuff that's happened in this relationship. Let's remember the good years and good times that we have had. Today's Mother's Day. I had somebody stop me this week and say, Dan, is this your second or your third Mother's Day since your mom graduated to heaven? I said, actually, it's number 3. She graduated March 20th of 2013, had a Mother's Day right after that. This is number 3. And they said, are you dreading Mother's Day? I said, not at all. I'm already practicing for it. For the last week, I've been re-chewing my best mom memories. I've been bringing them back up. I've thought about Mom teaching us to swim, which was a huge exercise in patience. I've thought about the fact that my mom never raised her voice in all the years that I knew her. Never heard her do that. I remember that my mom would float on a raft when we went camping, and we would tie a ski rope to a tree on the shore to the raft to keep her from floating away. But once in a while, just out of orneriness, we'd sneak in and untie it. One day, she floated a mile down the lake. I mean, I remember all of these fun things. And what happens, this is the point, when you bring back a joyful memory, the joyful emotion comes with it. All memories have emotions attached to them. And what it means to rejoice is to remind yourself, wow, I've had 39 years with this woman. She rocks. And yes, at the moment, she's driving me nuts, but she rocks. And I got to remember that in this moment of conflict. I got to remember in a moment of conflict with my kid that we brought those kids into the world and we're proud to have them. And we love them and we want them. Maybe not at the moment, but most of the time. And we've got to rejoice, guys. This is a constant principle in the scripture, to re-chew, to rejoice. It's a big thing. Second practice is encourage. Sometimes in the middle of conflict, you've got to stop and encourage the folks that you're in conflict with. Now, why is that? Write it in. Because all conflict drains you. Have you noticed that's true? If you thrive on conflict, you are unusual and maybe crazy. Some of us do better in conflict than others. That's good. But if you look forward to conflict, because conflict drains you, what does encouragement do? It fills you back up. The best way to know what encouragement means biblically is to change how we spell it. Spell it as I-N, courage. Because to encourage somebody means to tell them something that puts courage back in them. Would it be awesome if we mature to the point where we handle conflict so well that people are encouraged after the conflict? That can happen. I've seen it happen. Where there's resolution and there's peace restored and the relationship is put back right and folks can leave more encouraged than when they came in. I love doing this with my wife. Mary and I have had our share of conflict over the years. And the reason for that is we're both wired as opinionated leaders. We've both got something to say about almost everything. Now, when we first got married, Mary spent a year trying to be what she thought was a submissive wife. And after a year, I said to her, I don't know what you're doing, but I miss your spunk. I miss your opinions. I miss you saying what you think. I miss you lighting up with emotion. I don't know what happened to the girl I married, but take this submissive doormat thing and get rid of it. Now, there have been moments. No, really, it was a very, very important discussion. And if you hear Mary talk about it, it's even a bigger thing than that. She was trying to conform to some idea of what she was supposed to be. Here's the reality. Because we both are leaders, because we both have opinions, because we both have spunk, there's been plenty of conflict in our relationship. But if we stop and encourage each other mid-conflict, it changes it. I love doing this. She'll fire up and she'll get that flame in her eye look, and that spunk, and I'll just look at her and say, you are so sexy when you fire up. That is so awesome. You are never cuter than you are right now. I love it. She says, you're distracting me. Yes, I am. Let's hurry up and get this conflict resolved. It's just the idea of bragging on her, of encouraging her, of saying, hey, I loved you when we started this discussion. I love you in the middle of this discussion, and I'm going to love you when we finish this discussion, regardless of what we decide. The relationship's not on the line. You're not my opponent. You're my wife. You're my best friend. We're going to work through this, babe. It's going to be okay. And just that encouragement during the conflict is major. Parents, you got to do this with your kids, especially little ones. It's so easy to fall into a habit of being really, really, really tough when you correct your kid. You know what sometimes they need to hear? Honey, I love you. I adore you. I think you're the cutest thing that I've ever seen. But if you do that again, I'm going to have to give you a timeout. Because even though I love you enough to put your little butt in a little chair for a while. In Jesus' name. Now, I've encouraged them. I've loved on them. I've affirmed them. But I've also told them, we ain't doing this. We're not doing this. Encourage in the middle of conflict is so, so important. And finally, it's the same thing we started with today. I want to say it again at the end, and I want to spend a little bit of time on it. You've got to have the practice of waging peace. One of the best moments of this series was when Jet was here 5 weeks ago. And he asked a question where he said, are you a peacemaker, a peace breaker, or a peace faker? A lot of folks fake peace because they think keeping the peace is the goal. I'll just be quiet and not cause conflict. That will eat a hole in your soul because all you're doing is swallowing down and internalizing the conflict. Doesn't fix anything. I got to wage peace. I've got to wage it. Scripture says, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Would you circle the word everyone? It's a Greek word that means everyone. Now, some of us live at perfect peace with everybody outside our home and never have peace in our home. Others of us have great peace at home, but we've got an ornery edge with everybody else. I want to be at peace. That doesn't mean not dealing with the conflict. It means dealing with it in a godly way, waging peace. I want you to look at this next verse. Blessed are the peacemakers. They'll be called the children of God. Now, this is an interesting phrase in Hebrew thinking. Let me see if I can explain it for just a minute. This is the same as somebody saying in English, you're just like your daddy. You got that trait from your mama. Oh, yeah, it's easy to see whose kid you are. What Jesus is literally saying here is, when you're making peace, when you're waging peace, you're just like your Father. You're just like God. You're proving yourself to be a true child of God. Will we commit to wage peace? We're going to have a response time in a minute. I'm going to give you the last two blanks, but everybody look this way. For 5 weeks, we've talked about major truths around conflict. We talked about getting in the ring on week 1, taking on the conflict, not running from it. Week 2, we talked about you got to start with grace and stay there because Jesus offers grace to us. We'll never have to offer more grace to somebody else than we've already received. Week 3, we talked about getting outside help when it's beyond you. Last week, Rob did a great job of talking about don't let your desire become your demand. Today, I'm saying, will you take on the conflict and wage peace? And here's why. When Jesus did this, when he went to a cross, he wasn't waging war. He wasn't keeping the peace. He was waging peace. He gave the ultimate sacrifice to buy us peace with God this way, so we could also have peace with man this way. And if Scripture says I'm never more like God than when I'm waging peace, then I'm going to make peace. So if sometime in the last 5 weeks, the Spirit of God has said to you, that one's got your name on it, that's your thing. We're going to have a time of response in a minute where we're going to say, hey, you can come to the front. Here at Lenexa, up at Speedway, up at the prison, wherever you are on the internet, you can kneel somewhere. You come to the front, just stand here for a minute and say, Jesus, here's my commitment to you to wage peace. Just tell him and then go back to your seat. I'm going to give you time to do that. Here's the last 2 things I'd like you to write in. Keep going till you get peace. Waging peace is not a one-time battle. It's an ongoing war. We got to wage it. P.S. It may take some time. Jesus died to give us peace, guys. Let's not live without it.